Foreign ministers from the G7 and around the world have gathered this morning in Niagara.
The issues we are facing transcend the G7 and our borders.
That's Minister Anand speaking about energy, global security, and economic resiliency, and how those will all be talking points today. But the focus will also be on Foreign Affairs Minister Anand and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio meeting later. Joining us with what we can expect is CTV's national correspondent, Rachel Aiello. Rachel, this meeting could be the last for the G7 in 2025. First of all, set up the general agenda for today for us.
Yeah, good morning, Anne-Marie. So today is the main day of this G7 foreign ministers meeting here in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And yes, this is kind of rounding out Canada's year-long G7 presidency. So Anita and Anand said last night that she's hoping today's discussions can be held in a collaborative and cooperative spirit. But that is really what is going to be tested today. There are a series of sessions, working sessions, with not only the G7 foreign ministers, but Anand has invited a series of other world leaders from other countries, foreign ministers, to take part in those discussions. And so there's going to be more views around the table. Some of the things they're going to be talking about today: energy security, critical minerals, maritime security and prosperity. And then about 40 minutes from now, Anne-Marie, there's going to be an announcement with Minister Anand and her Ukrainian counterparts. We're watching to see what more could be announced from Canada's perspective to help that country as Russia's war continues.
Then after that, Rachel, my understanding is when Minister Anand and Marco Rubio are set to hold a bilateral meeting. What are some of the things that could come out of that? And Anand yesterday saying, look, we are not here to talk about trade, but as you well know, the U.S. has made security part of their trade negotiations.
Yeah, absolutely. So around 11:45 is when that bilateral meeting between U.S. Secretary of State Rubio and Anand is scheduled to happen. Now, what we are going to be able to see is, that classic spray across the top. We'll have the cameras in for the hi, how are yous, and then we will be ushered out of the room. And that's really where I think any sort of rubber would be hitting the road. This is the first chance for Anand to talk one-on-one with her U.S. counterpart since trade talks stalled. So we're waiting to see exactly what could come from that, if she's even able to bring up or is going to try to bring up trade and try to find a way to get that dialogue going again, or is she going to try to focus on issues where they have more common ground and not try to rile feathers in this last G7? But we'll be watching that later this afternoon. We'll see what transpires, and then we'll have a chance to ask the minister about it. She's got a closing press conference scheduled for around 3 p.m. today.
You politely called it stalled, but the president said they were terminated. The ongoing trade war between Canada and the U.S., if you remember, was front and center at the G7 Leaders Summit in Alberta and Kananaskis this year. So, you've been there for the last couple of days. How has the tone changed around these meetings in the last 5 months?
Yeah, it's really been a fascinating thing to cover, Anne-Marie. I was at the Finance Minister Summit in Banff just ahead of the G7. And before that, there was the Charlevoix Foreign Ministers meeting where Jolie was the minister. And at the time, the rhetoric there was, is Rubio going to bring up the 51st state? That has kind of seemed to be put to the side. That's less the rhetoric we're hearing. And then when the finance ministers met, the conversation was on the financial impact of tariffs. But what I've noticed here so far, Anne-Marie, is that they are trying to focus on what they can do together, really emphasizing common ground and not trying to push on the trade file as much. It really seems like now the shock of all these countries who are facing trade issues with the United States, trade tension because of U.S. President Donald Trump, they have assessed the damage, so to speak, and now they're trying to find a path forward. And so we'll see what's in the communique. We'll see what kind of language there is about shared economic prosperity and security, because that, if you read between the lines of these diplomatic readouts that you get from these kinds of events, is what they would be talking about in reference to trade and tariffs. I would be surprised if you see those words specifically, though.
Canada and the U.S. obviously not the only countries that are represented at this summit. You already mentioned that there's going to be a press conference about Ukraine. What about the war with Israel and Hamas? What will be discussed there?
Yeah, so that was one of the topics that we are to understand came up last evening. There was a working dinner of the G7 leaders, and there was some conversation from Anand yesterday indicating that they want to talk about the continued path towards peace. Other global instability challenges were brought up as well, including in Sudan and Haiti. And we're waiting to get a sense from Anand if any more has been agreed to, but she had indicated that she was supportive of Trump's plan in the Middle East. And it's really one of those things, Anne-Marie, where they try to find ways to use language that everyone can get behind. And that is why you see some of the things coming out of these more soft in their language. But certainly the conversation around some of these world issues has evolved over Canada's G7 presidency. And Anand, the pressure is really on her now to round it out and come out of it in a way with some sort of tangible outcome, some sort of legacy or way that Canada can have its record stamped for the year it spent as the host of the G7.
CTV national correspondent Rachel Aiello, who's joining us live this morning from Niagara, where the G7 foreign ministers meeting is happening today. Thanks for joining us.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.